Okay. I know before in the past, when it came to complicated One Piece mysteries, I might have been way off the mark. But this one right here, when we're talking about why did the Iron Giant apologize to Joyboy, there seems to be this constant feeling of contrition. That's a fun word you don't get to use very often. Of apologizing for something. You know, they feel sorry for a particular thing that happened. Why are they doing that? What happened back in the Void Century to make them apologize to Joyboy? Like the very first thing that the Iron Giant does as soon as it wakes up and is moving around again is like, I'm sorry, Joyboy. You know, like what's going on with that, all right? Well, I have this one cracked, I'll tell you what. All right. So way back in the day, during the Void Century, Joyboy wanted to throw a party. And he was really excited for this party. He had been planning it for months, and he sent out messages to all of his friends, like 100 people, like, are you coming to my party? He gave them the date, he gave them the time, he made sure they all had their invitations, okay? And this was back in the Void Century when technology was advanced. He had multiple group chats, he had a Facebook group, he had everything, okay? And so everybody was saying, oh yeah, man, I'll be there, yeah, Saturday at 4, I'll be there. And he rented out a whole bowling alley, like the whole thing, and he had a cake, and he bought like 7 pizzas, and nobody showed up, and like, that made him feel really sad, and that's why they lost the war, all right? That it was their victory party. He's like, guys, we're gonna beat the 20 kings, so come on over here and we'll throw a party. And then the victory party, everybody didn't go to the victory party, and that's why they lost, okay? And then that's just how it goes. So sad, so sad. Everything's sad. Joyboy is sad, which is ironic. Poseidon was sad. The Iron Giant is sad. Zunesha's clearly sad. You know, is there anything I have in here that's just as sad that I can put up in the back? Oh, actually I do. Hold on. We have Pomni. Okay, so in the last chapter, the Iron Giant is finally waking up from its nap, and it's creaking around. A lot of people are like, man, that Iron Giant's really gonna do something, right? And I'm like, well, I mean, if it's gonna do something, it's gotta move a little bit faster in order to do it, you know? It's kind of like the same thing with Zunesha. A lot of people were saying, well, maybe Zunesha is the third ancient weapon. Maybe Zunesha is Uranus, right? Because it's this giant elephant. And the thing is, like, it's interesting that Zunesha might be the key to unlocking Pluton, which is an ancient weapon, but just by itself, it's very clear Zunesha is not some world-ending threat, okay? Unless there's something about Zunesha, like, I don't know, Bonnie uses her powers on Zunesha to make it younger so it can really move faster, because Jack was almost able to topple the thing, you know what I mean? Like humans are able to harm it. It's not like some, you know, ultimate weapon on its own, but it can gain access to Pluton, which is under Wano, which is very important, right? So in that regard, I don't think the Iron Giant is an ancient weapon. In fact, I think that the Ancient Giant is in and of itself a member of like multiple like robots that were all part of the same line. It might have been like the Pacifistas way back during the Void Century, except they were a lot bigger and they ran on a different power source, which is clearly tied to the Sun God's energy. You know, when Luffy goes into Gear 5th, that is giving it the energy to move, okay? So, yeah, I don't think this Ancient Giant in particular is going to be like a world-ending super weapon, okay? However, you know, and the thing is clearly badly damaged. I mean, it's almost like 900 years old, all right? So, any battle prospects that it might have had, like when it was at full capacity, 100% right off the assembly line or whatever, it probably doesn't have right now. I mean, this thing is barely running on probably like 2% power to get this thing up. It might be charging as the more Luffy stays in Gear 5th, this thing is able to move around more. Maybe it has a really cool energy cannon. Maybe it can breathe fire. It doesn't seem affected by the flames, which is, you know, okay, that's good. You know, it's like, all right, it can walk through the flames and stuff, but we really got to see the damage that this thing could take. In its current state, if maybe a really well-placed shot from one of the battleships of the Buster Call hit this thing in the head, it might be like, sorry, Joyboy, and then it might like fall down and try to get back up. I mean, this thing's really putting in the work, okay? So, why is it apologizing? And why did Zunesha apologize? And we also had the apology letter that Joyboy himself wrote to Poseidon, which was on the poneglyph at Fishman Island, right? All of these things come back to apologies, and I mean, it's really not hard in the grand scheme of things to see what the apology is about. It's they lost the war and the world government took over the world. So I kind of feel like everybody is really sorry about this right now. Like, now in the case with the poneglyph at Fishman Island, it was Joyboy penning that to Poseidon, talking about the Noah specifically. Like, the Noah was built during the Void Century, probably to, like, take everybody to the surface. Like, it was clearly meant as, like, an evacuation vessel for the millions of fishmen and merfolk that live down there, and still probably will serve as that evacuation device. When Fishman Island is destroyed, all the fishmen and merfolk get on the ship, and then Sea Kings tow it to the surface, and maybe it's like that symbol of, like, after the flood, when the ark rests on top of the mountain, and maybe that's the symbol for, like, now the fishmen and the merfolk can live under the sun, when the red line collapses or something like that. Like, the Noah serves as the center of that civilization, and then a new Fishman Island is built around it, right? And clearly Joyboy wanted that to happen maybe way back in the day. It didn't happen, and so the Noah is like, okay, well, we built this giant ship and didn't get a chance to use it, so hopefully someday somebody is able to carry on our legacy. Hopefully someday someone is able to achieve that dream, okay? And that's where kind of the Will of D comes from, and that's where everything kind of started with that, okay? And so all they could really do is leave the ship down there, and then Joyboy said he was sorry to Poseidon, and also all the future generations of not just Poseidon, all the future Poseidons like Shirahoshi, but just in general the fishmen and the merfolk of that place, of just being like, hey, I'm sorry, I really wanted you guys to live on the surface a while ago, and we messed up, and we lost the battle, and then what happened, okay? Kind of the same thing with Zunesha and the Iron Giant. Now, Zunesha, let's talk about Zunesha next, and then we'll do the Iron Giant, because the Iron Giant actually has a bunch of other implications. Oh, and by the way, to clarify something, so I don't think it's ever actually been shown in the story, like, Zunesha apologizing to Joyboy in the same way that the Iron Giant did. Like, when the Iron Giant woke up, it specifically said, I'm sorry, Joyboy, and I don't think Zunesha's ever done that, but, like, the overall context here is that Zunesha is punished for a crime it committed, and it's wandering through the waters, and from, like, the connection the Kozukis and the Zou, and the Minx had and everything on Zou, I'm just, like, basically, it's maybe a little bit of headcanon, but I think it's pretty clear that, like, Zunesha is in some way, like, involved in this conflict, in this war during the Void Century, and was fighting on the side of Joyboy, and is therefore apologizing in the sense of, like, why things ended up the way they did, and is, serving this punishment, walking the seas to, as, like, penance for that. So with Zunesha is a living being, is a elephant that is actually have been stated to be over 1,000 years old. Remember, the Void Century was from 900 to 800 years ago. Okay, so it's actually, like, when you're talking about, like in our context, it would be like BC, like 800 BC. Like, Toki gave her date of birth at like 827 BC or something like that. It would be kind of like that. So in the 800s is what we're talking about here. So Zunesha is well before that, like, was born around over 1,000 years ago. So Zunesha might have already been a pretty well-sized elephant by the time the Void Century battle and the war between the Clan of D and the, or I guess maybe the Ancient Kingdom is more apt, because we don't really know about the Clan of D yet. I mean, they existed, but we just don't know. The Ancient Kingdom versus the 20 kingdoms of the world that came together to fight against it, right? So could have been some promise there to fight alongside them, and or maybe, like, Zunesha was supposed to be there for a critical battle, or just something. Like Zunesha was given a very specific task, and it failed in that task. Why Zunesha carries out the task so faithfully now? The idea that Zunesha, no matter what, will just wander the earth and will never stop, and just, like, wandering. Maybe it's because it was given a task at one point by Joyboy and it failed, or maybe it was beguiled, maybe it was tricked by another group or something, and then was not there when Joyboy needed Zunesha to be there. And so somebody else gave it a task. Maybe it was Joyboy. Maybe it was something like, you will wander the earth for eternity or something. And Zunesha's like, okay, I will make sure to do that now, because I failed the first time. I need to make sure to succeed the second time to make up for it, Might be something like that. With the Iron Giant, it's a robot. So what's the level of sentience does this thing have? It seems to be very robotic in its tasks, but then again, so does kind of Zunesha. Zunesha is carrying out this task, wandering the entire Earth and never stopping until, I guess, somebody orders it to stop specifically. Like, it did say that Momonosuke can control, like, you have to give me an order, so could Momonosuke just say, hey, you don't have to wander the Earth anymore, don't worry about it, and the Zunesha's like, oh, okay, maybe. But when it comes to the Iron Giant was also during the Void Century. I'm assuming there was a whole legion of these things, attacking, the 20 kingdoms. Like, maybe they were fighting along. So they had to have been fighting with the Ancient Kingdom, because the Ancient Kingdom was advanced. So this was their battle, their mechs, I guess, their soldiers, their army. Maybe the 20 kings that eventually formed the world government, maybe they were afraid of the Ancient Kingdom having this giant army. Maybe they were peaceful giant robots, right? Like, the giant robots weren't used for warfare. They were used for construction. They were used like heavy construction machinery we have these days, like to lift up giant blocks and build huge structures. But maybe the members of the 20 kings, like the Doflamingo king from way back or whatever, the Don Quixote family, were like, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. What if these things were turned into, what if these things were weaponized? What if these things turned into, like, war machines? We couldn't stop it. We need to stop it right now. We need to get control of them. Now that I'm actually thinking about this, could the Robot Legion in general, like not this Iron Giant specifically, but just like how with the Sea Kings, one Sea King by itself, I mean, depending on the size, you can deal with it. Like, the Lord of the Coast was one shot by pre-time skip Luffy. But then you get to the bigger Sea Kings that are like 5,000 meters tall. That's going to be hard enough to take care of in just one person dealing with that. But the whole ocean of Sea Kings all obeying one person, that's the reason Shirahoshi's ability as Poseidon is an ancient weapon. That's the reason it's dangerous, right? If she just ordered all of the Sea Kings to just destroy Marineford, they would do that. There's really nothing they could do to stop that, right? So, an entire legion of Iron Giants, I guess it wouldn't be Pluton, because Pluton was said to be sleeping under Wano. Then again, we don't know what Pluton is. We assume Pluton was a giant battleship, because that's the way it was described. And Frankie had the blueprints, and it was always described as a battleship, so if those blueprints were true, then again, the blueprints were also meant as a counter weapon for Pluton. So does that necessarily mean that the blueprints are the exact same thing as Pluton? I guess they would be, because it did say Pluton right on there. There's a theory that maybe, like, Pluton, the blueprints, was a giant battleship to fight against the real Pluton, which might not necessarily have been a giant battleship. It's a battleship. I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be. Pluton has been stated multiple times to be a battleship. If Frankie, being the shipwright that he is, was looking at the blueprints, he would have been like, yeah, this is clearly the blueprints to a battleship, okay? Yeah. So it's probably not a legion of robots, okay? So that only leaves Uranos, which would be the god of the sky, which is a little strange if it was a legion of robots or anything. So maybe the robots weren't even an ancient weapon. Maybe the robots were literally just there, and the Ancient Kingdom built them, and other kingdoms were kind of a little bit leery about this, because a giant robot army, even if it's a peaceful giant robot army, is still a giant robot army, right? It's like, we don't feel about this, right? Or maybe they just felt threatened in general by the advancements the Ancient Kingdom was making, and it's like, hey, it probably was not a situation that the Ancient Kingdom was trying to take over the world. Might have been a situation that if they decided to do that, they could, and the other kingdoms got apprehensive about that and is like, hey, if this Ancient Kingdom over here wanted to build a robot army and laser beams and conquer the entire world and subjugate all of us, there's nothing we can do about that then. We should probably deal with that now. And then they got together, formed a little coalition. Now, Lily was part of that, Vivi's ancestor and stuff like that. So there's just so many pieces of this. We're not really, and she was clearly not like an evil person or a villain or anything like that. So there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. I think the way that Oda's going to spin this is it's not going to be a strict, like, here are the good guys, here are the evil guys, and that's all you got, right? I'm sure this is going to be a thing where there's going to be people on Joyboy's side of things that were a little bit more on the villainous side or might be more evil, and there might be some of the kingdoms, not all 20 kingdoms were objectively evil. We know Lily was okay. Yeah, the original Don Quixote ruler, we know he subjugated all of the Tontadas and he was basically the devil, so yeah, he's pretty bad. And Eam is obviously Eam Narona, one of the original, so yeah, they're not that great. But maybe some of the other kingdoms were a little bit like, hey, I don't know if we should exterminate this ancient kingdom. I don't know if that's a good idea. And they went with it because it's like, all right, but they weren't really bad people. Joyboy himself, to be honest, we don't know the kind of person this guy was. If he was exactly like Luffy in terms of his personality, in terms of his dreams or goals, or was he a little bit more in the morally gray area? Like, we just don't know where he was at, okay? Not to say Joyboy was evil, like in the level of like Doflamingo or something like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that like Joyboy at a certain point, I don't know, maybe Joyboy at some point was just like, hey, I think we should use the ancient weapons to wipe out the 20 kingdoms. We're being fighting. I'm sure whatever war was fought, it was fought over a long period of time, like several years, maybe even decades, who knows. And the ancient kingdom had these weapons at their disposal. They have this giant battleship called Pluton and whatever Uranus is. And if Joyboy was part of the ancient kingdom, then they would have Poseidon on their side, because Poseidon and Joyboy, I guess, were lovers. I guess it was implied, right? So maybe at one point the war is dragging on and on and on and on and on, and there's like no end in sight. And when war drags on for that long, that is when things start getting like nuclear weapony, and you know what I mean? Like, we're just gonna make a big boom to end this, right? So what if that happened in the One Piece equivalent? Like, war's going on for years, it's in covering the entire world. Like, what's gonna happen to this place? The world will get bombed to shit before it's over. So Joyboy is one day, he's just like, I think we should just use the ancient weapons and wipe out the 20 kingdoms. Just obliterate them, and then the war will be over, and then we would have won. And maybe Zunesha and maybe Poseidon are like, hey, that's going too far. We don't want to do that. We're not going to be part of this anymore. And that might have caused a little bit of a schism there between Joyboy and his like top generals, or the people that were closest friends with him, like his confidants. Like, I don't know, man. Like, imagine if like Luffy is very happy-go-lucky. He's like 19 years old. Let's say Luffy is thrust into a world war over 10 years, and after some people that he's loved have died, and like, let's say there's this war, and like Usopp dies and Frankie dies, and Luffy is with the rest of the Straw Hats, and it's like 10 years later, and Luffy's kind of this war general, kind of more like Dragon, like he's seen shit at this point, and it changes you. And at a certain point, it's like, I think we should use Pluton and just end it. We have Pluton. We can end the war, Nami. We can end the war. That's what Frankie would have done. No, Luffy, I can't do it. I can't just bomb all these. It's not working. I don't know. A chopper, you can do it, right? It's just like, I don't know. And maybe something like that happened with Joyboy. And he's like, desperate times come for desperate measures. And that was the split. Like, at that point, his closest generals and confidants, like Zunesha and everybody, and I know Zunisha's just an elephant. I mean, I don't know, Toki was there, maybe, I don't know. And they all split from him, and he didn't have his nakama. He didn't have his friends there for him when he needed them most. And that's how he lost the war, and that's how he died. And then the fruit was reincarnated and all that stuff. So, I don't know. Clearly it had something to do with the loss of the war. That was the whole idea behind the apology. We just don't know the circumstances. Maybe even trying to figure out the circumstances with the limited information we have now, it might be a bit of a fool's errand. Like, we might just not be able to. We're not playing with a full deck right now, right? If you need the 52 card deck to figure out the Void Century, and we're maybe only playing with like 12 cards right now. You know what I mean? It's just like, what are we can't really figure it out, but at least we could try. We could try, right, Pomni? Yeah, we could try. Okay. Now, a big thing of this in One Piece is, like, history tends to repeat itself, or maybe not things are inevitable, so to speak, but it's almost like the will of those that came before will eventually come to pass. Like Joyboy's will happen eventually. So the Iron Giant also might be apologizing. Maybe not necessarily from something that happened during, I guess during the Void Century, but it also might be apologizing from what happened 200 years ago, because the Giant woke up 200 years ago to scale the Red Line to Marijois and then attack it, and then it turned offline, and then it got chucked down into the scrapyard at Egghead, right? Okay, so couple of things about that. Number one, I'm assuming it had some kind of thing programmed into it, like attack Marijois or, you know, liberate the Lunarians at the top of the red line. So when it woke up 200 years ago, it was like, must climb red line, reaches the top, turns off. And so maybe he's apologizing, you know, now that he's waking up at Egghead, maybe he's apologizing. I tried to liberate, you know, the Lunarians. I tried to save them. I tried to destroy Marijois and what the world nobles have created, but I failed. Might be apologizing for that. And then the other thing is, if this thing runs on the power of Gear 5th and the Sun God, Nika, and everything like that, then that therefore implies that 200 years ago, somebody with that power awakened it. Now, I think when the Gorosei were speaking about the power when Luffy awakened it at Wano, I can't remember if they specifically said this power hasn't been awakened in like 800 years. I think they just said that no one's awakened that power in a long time, or it's been so long now that like the idea of someone awakening it is probably not going to happen, right? But, you know, 200 years ago, that's a long time ago. I mean, the Gorosei, we don't know how old all of them are. We assume that they are probably older than that, and Im is definitely older than that, but we just don't know. So maybe they were thinking, like, yeah, no one's awakened the Gumu Gumu no Mi in over 200 years, so who cares? You know what I mean? That's not going to happen. The odds of that happening are so slim, but then Luffy was able to do it. So yeah, I think 200 years ago, there was somebody that also carried on Joyboy's will, that ate the Gumu Gumu no Mi, the Hito Hito no Mi, model sun god, awakened the powers, powered on the giant, it attacked. Maybe that person died at that point, and then the giant turned off and lost its source of power, and then it could no longer fight anymore. Dude, now that I'm picturing this, I'm picturing way back in the Void Century, I'm picturing Joyboy going into the Sun God form and laughing maniacally as a legion of Iron Giants are, like, marching through the water like the freaking Titans and just being like, destroy! You know, like, I'm picturing that, and that's very devastating. Oh! Going along with the idea that they're also giant robots, maybe they were originally not built for war, they were built for construction and, like, you know, building up the ancient kingdom. What if it's the Iron Giants that built Impel Down? Because there's always these huge structures in One Piece, like there's a lot of them, and you question how the hell did they build half of this stuff, right? The idea is they could have used Impel Down, like the Impel Down could have been built by fishmen and merfolk's slavery, which is probably the most likely, but also if you have giant robots, you know, they could probably do that too. Dude, there's probably still a lot of these things too, like at the bottom of the ocean. Like if you dive down, I'm sure you might find ancient giants like just littering the bottom of the ocean floor, completely covered in barnacles and stuff, and it seems like they were built pretty sturdy, like this one right now. I mean, yeah, it's kind of creaky, it definitely needs some WD-40 on that thing. I'm sure Vegapunk's got some lying around, but the fact it's lasted so long and the power source can energize it enough, it clearly was built to last, okay? I mean, can you think of any like electronic that humans have created now that like in almost 1,000 years that thing is going to be like this phone right here? If I just bury this phone and then 1,000 years later someone tries to plug it in, yeah, I don't think it's going to work, you know? So yeah, if nothing else, the ancient kingdom, they knew what they were doing when they built these things. But yeah, I have no idea what it's all about, but I just wanted to make a video talking about the events of the last chapter and where it exactly could be going, like some possibilities here. I just, overall, I guess, I want people to start thinking about that when we do get that Void Century flashback, we do get to see what was up with Joyboy. I really don't think it's going to be so like, you know, oh, the ancient kingdom lived in peace and harmony, and everybody was nice, and everybody was good, and then everything changed when the 20 kingdoms attacked, and they were all objectively evil, raw. Because we already know that that's not the case with Lily. And we know that, like, that's not going to be the idea. And Oda doesn't usually do things that black and white, but I just want to set it up. Like, I'm sure when we finally do get that flashback, we're going to see some stuff from Joyboy that's probably going to, or Joyboy's group that the Clan of D did, and they might be like, whoa, okay, that might be a little bit overkill. And then some other stuff from the world government where like, oh, that's even more overkill, you know? And it's like, it's war. It changes people, you know what I mean? And it can result in some insane things, and it resulted in the current One Piece world. So just keep that in mind moving forward. All right, well, anyway, that's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let's go to that end screen.